On February 28, 2026, I filmed these two men crossing the river in rough, fast-moving water at the second river crossing on the Bridge to Nowhere Trail. The next morning, at this same spot, 33-year-old Jacqueline Aguilar de Lau lost her footing and was swept downstream. A few hours later, search and rescue located her lifeless body a little less than a mile away. They noted significant head trauma. The medical examiner determined that her cause of death was accidental drowning. Jacqueline is the most recent victim of this river, but she is not the only one. Rona Mae Cuenca, a 59-year-old visiting nurse, was last seen at 9 a.m. on Saturday, March 9, 2024, crossing the river just below first water. Her body has still not been found. On April 8, 2023, 27-year-old H. Zhang was swept downstream at the second river crossing. The medical examiner ruled her death an accidental drowning. She also sustained blunt head trauma. On April 1, 2011, 20-year-old college student Joe Lee was pulled away by the current while crossing the river on a handline. His death was ruled an accidental drowning, and he too suffered blunt head trauma. Before we go any further, a quick note. What you're about to hear reflects my own analysis, my direct observations on this river, my personal experience, my review of river-related deaths on the East Fork of the San Gabriel River, insights from a water safety lecture at a wilderness medicine conference, and the perspectives of subject matter experts. I'm not claiming to know everything, and I can't guarantee that every detail in this program is perfectly accurate. This is not a substitute for professional training or official guidance. It's simply what I've learned, shared in the hope that it helps you stay safer out there. All of these deaths occurred during periods of high river flow in March or April, that is late winter and early spring. February is typically the wettest month in the Los Angeles area, and many hikers avoid this trail during that cold, rainy period. But as soon as the weather warms up in late winter and early spring, hikers return in large numbers. In rainy years, this is exactly when the river is still running fast and high. As you would expect, the deaths occurred in seasons with high rainfall. For practical purposes, think of it this way. When rainfall is above average, river crossings can become hazardous. 3 of the 4 victims were women. Among the victims whose heights are known, Rona Mae, 5 foot 0 inches. H. Zhang was 5 foot 5 inches. And Joe Lee, the only male victim, was 5 feet 5 inches. I don't yet know the height of the most recent victim, but statistically, women tend to be shorter than men, and Joe Lee was a relatively short male. This pattern matters because shorter hikers are more likely to be swept downstream than taller hikers. Here's why. The weight of the body pressing down on the feet is what provides traction. When a person stands in water, the portion of their body below the waterline is buoyed upward by the water, contributing little or no downward force, and therefore little traction. It's the mass above the waterline that creates the downward force that enables the feet to grip the riverbed. As more of the body becomes submerged, less of that mass remains above the waterline, and traction decreases. Consequently, in a given depth of water, a taller person will have more traction than a shorter person. In cold, fast, high-volume water, that difference can be the line between maintaining footing and being swept away. Body composition also plays a role. Consider 2 people of the same weight, one lean and muscular, and the other with a high body fat percentage. Bone and muscle are denser than water and tend to sink, while fat is less dense than water and tends to float. In deep water, this difference matters. The lean person will have more of their weight pressing down through their feet, giving them some traction on the riverbed, whereas the person with more body fat will float and have little or no traction. However, in most real-world river crossing situations, the water isn't deep enough for buoyancy differences to dominate. The amount of mass above the waterline has a far greater influence on traction and stability than body composition alone. Grip strength is a key factor when using a handline. Individuals, men or women, who are not physically fit tend to have a lower grip strength. If the hydrodynamic force of the current pushing against their body exceeds their grip strength, they will lose hold of the handline and be swept downstream. That said, shorter hikers are not the only ones swept downstream. I know of 3 men who were swept away on this river and survived. They survived because they managed to self-rescue. One of those men is me. In 2019, I lost my footing at the first river crossing and was carried downstream by the current. Fortunately, I had a river self-rescue plan. As we saw, blunt head trauma was present in all 3 recovered victims. Trauma that causes disorientation or unconsciousness can quickly lead to drowning. In H. Zheng's autopsy report, the medical examiner explicitly states, Zheng died of drowning, with blunt head trauma listed as a contributing condition. Blunt head trauma is listed as a contributing condition as it may have rendered her unconscious and unable to remove herself from the river. Protecting your head is essential for maintaining situational awareness. You want to go down the river, feet first, not head first. A self-rescue plan gives you the best chance to protect your head and survive. If you get swept downstream and don't have a self-rescue plan, panic is almost inevitable. Panic can cause you to freeze or to make a high-risk, low-reward move like lunging toward the riverbank in a desperate attempt to escape the river. Both reactions are dangerous because they hand control over to the river. The river doesn't care whether you go downstream head first or feet first. Eventually, it will spin you around head first if you don't stop it. Then it will smash your head into the rocks or other objects until you drown. We saw exactly that in the drowning victims. Don't let the river decide your fate. Take control of it yourself. You do this by immediately assuming the defensive swimming position, body supine, feet together pointing downstream, knees slightly bent to absorb impacts, head up and looking downstream, hands at your sides. In this position, your head is protected and you have better control of your path downstream. This position is the foundation of a complete self-rescue plan. I develop my self-rescue plan before I step into the water at my crossing point. At my crossing point, I first look downstream and identify potential exit points. If I don't see potential exit points, I'll look for another place to cross. Then I identify hazards, like rocks and downed trees, I want to avoid if I'm swept downstream. If I identify few minor hazards, I may cross. But if they look unmanageable, I find another place to cross. I unbuckle my sternum strap and hip belt, then loosen my shoulder straps so I can ditch my backpack quickly if needed. A waterlogged backpack can weigh you down. Immediately before I step in the water, I remind myself of the defensive swimming position. Remember, body supine, feet together pointing downstream, knees slightly bent to absorb any impacts, head up, looking downstream, hands at my sides. I enter the water, and if I am swept downstream, the first action I take is to take control of my path down the river. I assume the defensive swimming position and use my legs and hands to steer myself around any hazards I scouted out ahead of time. Then, when I see my exit point, I assume the aggressive swimming position. I turn to the prone position, head still upstream, and I swim aggressively to the exit point. That is what I did when I was swept downstream, and that is why I survived when others did not. If you want to know why I was swept downstream, I'll have to explain it in another program. For now, let's focus on when you should not cross a river. The Sierra Madre Search and Rescue Team published an article on March 4th, 2026, titled, Not Just a Creek, Why Moving Water is So Dangerous for Hikers. It offers a simple rule of thumb. Water above mid-thigh or moving faster than you can comfortably walk is likely too dangerous to cross on foot. This is excellent guidance for those who lack experience with water crossings. Those of us who have crossed many rivers use other criteria, and later in this program, I'll explain how I personally assess a crossing to ensure my safety. But first, I want to address something far more fundamental. When I see hikers wading into rapidly moving water or water above their mid-thigh, I often ask them a simple question. Can you swim? The answer that I hear far too often is, no. This terrifies me, especially as someone who's been swept downstream myself. A non-swimmer who loses her footing in rough water is unlikely to survive. Once the current takes you, you must be able to stay oriented, protect your head, and self-rescue. Without those skills, the odds are grim. So it makes perfect sense to avoid crossing water that is above your mid-thigh or moving faster than you can walk if you are not a competent swimmer in rough water or cannot self-rescue after being swept downstream. Over 80% of Americans can swim, but less than half of Americans are competent swimmers. According to the American Red Cross, to be water competent, you must be able to perform these 5 skills in sequence. Number 1. Step or jump into the water over your head. Number 2. Return to the surface and float or tread water for 1 minute. Number 3. Rotate in a full circle and find an exit. Number 4. Swim 25 yards to an exit. And number 5. Exit from the water. If in a pool, be able to exit without using the ladder. I would add 2 more skills for rough river water. Number 6. Be able to steer yourself around hazards in the defensive swimming position. And number 7. Be able to time your breathing. Breath hold when the river dunks your head underwater or when a wave covers your face. These last 2 are not so easily trainable or testable. If you don't have these skills, stick to the rule of thumb. I generally don't cross the river if I see sediment churned up in the water. I like to see the water clear. With clear water, I can see the rocks and other obstacles in the water. With the sediment in the water, I must probe with my foot or my trekking pole to find the obstacles, which adds considerable work and risk. I have crossed this river with sediment churned up a couple of times, but usually I don't even attempt to cross. Definitely, don't cross the river if your gut tells you the water looks like it is moving too fast or it looks too deep to cross. Definitely don't cross the river if you see unmanageable hazards downstream. Definitely don't cross the river if you see debris floating down the river. If you are struck by even a small log, it can knock you off balance and send you downstream. Once at this river, I watched a dead tree float past me. You do not want to get hit by a tree. Its branches can entangle you, and if the trunk rotates, it could pin you underwater and drown you. Definitely don't cross the river if the moment you step in, you feel rocks striking your ankles or feet. That happened to me once on this river. I stepped in the water and felt small rocks hitting me. This surprised me, and I immediately stepped back out. In a strong current, it's even possible to hear rocks rolling along the riverbed. You do not want to walk into a river where the current is displacing rocks. We just looked at the features that tell us not to cross in high water. Now let's flip the perspective and identify the features that make a location a good place to cross. These are the features I look for when choosing the safest place to cross a river in high water. A gentle river slope. Flatter gradients slow the current, reducing the horizontal force on your legs. A wide section of the river. When the channel widens, the same volume of water spreads out, making the water shallower and less forceful. A smooth, uniform river bottom. Fewer protruding rocks mean fewer hidden tripping hazards and more predictable footing. Reliable exit points downstream. If you lose your footing, you need places where you can safely get out of the water. At every potential crossing, I start by identifying the critical point or points. So, what exactly is the critical point? In this picture, the red arrow shows the path where the river is flowing fastest and deepest. The blue line shows my intended path across the river. The place where these 2 lines intersect is the critical point. This is the place where I will feel the greatest hydrodynamic force and where I'm most likely to lose my footing. The critical point is often near the middle of the river, but it can be shifted toward one bank or the other, as it is in this example. Sometimes there may be even two critical points. At this crossing, a large rock sits in the middle of the river just downstream. That rock slows the water above it, splitting the main current into two fast-moving channels and creating two separate critical points. To decide whether I can safely cross a river, I first have to determine whether I can make it through the critical point, the most dangerous point in the crossing. I watch other hikers cross whenever possible. Their crossings help me judge the water's velocity, the water depth, places where the footing might be unstable, and the location of the critical point. If no one is going ahead of me, I identify the critical point myself. Then I move slowly into the river, using my eyes to read the current and my trekking pole to probe the depth and the riverbed as I go. If conditions don't feel right, I turn back. Remember, if the water is already bad before you reach the critical point, it will be worse at the critical point. Don't push on, turn around.
That feels really good.
Handlines are popular on the Bridge to Nowhere trail. They can make the crossing safer, but they are not without risk. Ropes cannot always be trusted. The ropes you see at the crossings are placed by hikers and occasionally by employees of the bungee jumping company at the bridge. No one officially maintains them. You use them entirely at your own risk. Before relying on a rope, inspect it yourself. Look for fraying, cuts, or abrasions. Check that the knots are properly tied and secure. Ideally, look for two independently anchored ropes spanning the river. When two are present, grab both. They provide redundancy. If one fails, the other may still hold. Ropes do break. The rope used in this high water crossing on April 29, 2023, broke nearly a year later on April 6, 2024. Fortunately, the water level was low at the time, and although hikers were using it as a handline, no one was injured. This incident underscores why you should never assume a rope is safe simply because it's there. At first glance, crossing on the upstream side of a handline looks advantageous because you're not dependent on your grip strength to keep connected to the handline. But when you fall, you quickly realize why you should not do this. One arm is over the rope, and your body is trapped under the rope. The strong current makes it nearly impossible to get back on your feet. If this man's friend wasn't pulling on the rope, his head would be underwater, and he would be drowning. Your only ways out of this situation are either someone rescues you immediately, or you get yourself disentangled from the rope and execute your self-rescue plan. In this man's case, I intervened. I grabbed his arm to keep him from getting swept downstream. Then I grabbed the handle of his backpack and pulled him out of the swift current. Lesson learned? Don't cross on the upstream side of a handline. No. The company that offers bungee jumping at the bridge ensures that their clients are not swept downstream at river crossings by providing their clients a simple chest harness made from webbing. They use a carabiner to attach it to the handline at each river crossing. A number of hikers copied their practice. The woman in this film clip also wore a harness. She lost her footing in the strong current, and the current prevented her from reestablishing her footing. Dangling from the rope and trapped by the current, She could not advance herself along the rope. Fortunately, her hiking partner and other hikers pulled her across the rope to the riverbank in safety. I attended a wilderness medicine conference a month after this occurred and learned that river rescue experts advise never tying yourself to a rope on a river. The bungee company gets away with this practice by having an employee immediately available to assist any client that gets into trouble to ensure their safety. According to the medical examiner investigator report, the decedent and her boyfriend met with 3 of his friends to hike the Bridge to Nowhere hiking trail. 2 of the friends had crossed the river when they decided to use the rope to help the others cross, as the current was very strong. The decedent wrapped the rope around herself to cross the river. At around 0745 hours, she lost her balance, causing her to fall in the water and become stuck in the rope due to the current. Her boyfriend attempted to help her, but was unable to remove the rope or help her out. The decedent then either flipped out of the rope, causing her to become loose, or the person holding the rope let go. The decedent then went down the river with her boyfriend, but the boyfriend lost his grip on her. The autopsy report adds an important detail. They tied the rope around one tree on one side of the river. If the rope was secured to a tree, then no one let go of it. This raises questions about how the rope was being used and how it contributed to the sequence of events. The rope was intended to protect her, but it ultimately trapped her. When she wrapped it around herself, she created a fixed connection to a stationary anchor in a fast-moving river. When she lost her balance, the current forced her downstream while the rope held her in place. Her struggle to escape from the rope drained her energy and left her in far worse condition than if she had crossed without it. She ended up exactly where she did not want to go, pulled downstream by the current, exhausted, and unable to fight her way out of the river. I took this photo at the second river crossing 3 weeks after Zeng was swept downstream. The hiker shown is using a handline with a backup rope attached to his waist. This leads to the question, did H. Zeng attempt to cross using the same handline setup with an additional backup rope tied to a tree when she entered the river? I have many questions about this case, and I would like to speak with someone who witnessed the incident firsthand. If you were an eyewitness, or if you know someone who is present, please ask them to contact me through my business email listed in the program description. I'd like to speak directly to hiking group leaders for a moment, whether you're guiding a large group or just a few family members and friends. As I mentioned earlier, shorter hikers and those who aren't at a high level of fitness are at significantly greater risk of being swept downstream. There is also an important psychological factor at play. When 1 or 2 people have already crossed, as we saw in Zeng's case, it creates pressure on the remaining members to follow, even if conditions aren't safe for them. Those who are most at risk may take chances they would never take on their own. In addition, leaders trying to help vulnerable hikers across may unintentionally encourage techniques or decisions that feel helpful in the moment but are actually dangerous, such as tying a rope around a person. If you encourage someone to cross the river and that person is swept away and drowns, that will stay with you for the rest of your life. Remember, if the hiker is not water competent for rough water, stick to the rule of thumb. You can avoid these high-risk situations by having an alternative activity, a plan B, whenever there is a possibility of dangerously high water. Tell the group about your plan B ahead of time. Plant the idea early. If conditions are bad, we are doing something else. As a leader, you must protect the most vulnerable members of the group. When you reach the river, see unfavorable conditions and realize those members cannot safely cross. You tell the group you are implementing Plan B, and the group stays together. For most of us, it's a long drive to the Bridge to Nowhere trail, and naturally, we want that drive to feel worthwhile. On 4 or 5 occasions, I've arrived to find the water too deep to cross and had to create an alternative activity. Earlier this year, for example, I visited the Billy Heaton mine and explored the ruins and waterfalls in the gully upstream from the culvert. On another occasion, a friend and I hiked the Heaton Flat Trail to Allison Saddle. The trail begins near the restroom at Heaton Flat and climbs about 2,700 feet over 3.8 miles to the saddle. From there, you can see the summit of Iron Mountain and the west slope of Mount Baldy. It's an out-and-back hike, and from the Bridge to Nowhere trailhead, the total distance is 8.6 miles. If you saw my program on the disappearance of the actor Julian Sands, you might recognize this photo I used at the beginning of that program. I took that picture on the day we chose this alternative hike because the river was impassable. If you haven't seen that program yet, take a look at it. Here's a link. Thanks for joining me today. If today's program helped you think differently about risk, give it a like and share it with someone you'd want on the trail with you. Take care out there, and I'll see you on our next adventure.